Okay, thank you. I'm Yukai Nagata, and Tableau Zen Master 2019 and 2020. Thank you very much for having me today. So I'm so happy to speak about how to enhance digital transformation, how to build data inclusive culture in your company. So let me introduce first just a little bit about me. I recently established my own company for data analytics and visualization consulting. Then now I'm CEO of my company, and I'm a master, and I'm the head of Japan Tableau user group, Nihon Tableau user kaicho. I'm the head of Japan Tableau user group, and now I'm a researcher of Waseda University. 2 weeks ago, I just published my book, data visualization design. All right. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, sorry, Japanese included, but this is my, I had a lot of event, media, article and global activities as well. So I experienced a Tableau Doctor first in Las Vegas last year in the TC19. Okay, so, okay. So let me introduce my Japan chapter user group. So we welcomed Paulo as a presenter last year in December. So we had 200 or 300 attendees in Japan chapter user group. We really enjoyed this. These are some pictures uh, in Tokyo Tableau user group. All
It's a great event.
right. All right. All right. So let me start my presentation. How to enhance digital transformation, how to build data inclusive culture. About data utilization, studies show that many companies are failing to invest in data utilization, digital transformation, referred from McKinsey Analytics. So this is McKinsey Analytics research. 92% of companies are failing to invest in leveraging of data. On the other hand, it is said that good data utilization, good digital transformation can result in of more than 7 times faster than the global GDP, customer acquisition, and customer loyalty. This article shed light on the action that foster a data culture perspective, which is particularly important when talking about data utilization and digital transformation. This article is written as a guideline for action and an argument for fostering a data culture for real implementation rather than a superficial, abstract, or of elements necessary for data-based organizational initiatives. This is because intrinsic data utilization doesn't stop at just deploying tools or buying software. In any organization, there are bound to be times of hesitation as you move forward with your data. I believe there is value in having a bird's eye view to help us in such a situation. So, agenda, the three most important perspectives started with data. So data alone is not enough to make data utilization a success. And number three, the data culture fostering how to change the culture. So important perspectives, prototype, agile thinking, small start. The important perspectives, prototype. The starting phase of data utilization, DX, is a major directional decision. The most important thing in the starting phase of prototypes, agile thinking are starting small, as I said. So by creating prototypes, trial products, trial Tableau dashboard, trial visualization, you will become aware of things outside the frame of what can be done now. It's just like the image in the slide. So when you make a plan, you can't make a concrete and constructive plan without concrete information and materials. However, many companies are still discussing the direction of data utilization and discussions without anything concrete in mind. The value is always in the feedback and discussion of the concrete. Even if you talk about it in abstract concept, it will become a picture blank and your time in the meeting will be wasted. So the quality of the prototype is also important here. This is because, for example, when you are introducing a new BI, if you only know Excel, you're likely to try to do the same thing as Excel in the new BI. So you can't measure the power of something new. Surprisingly, there are many people who look at your creations and think, this is the only thing I can do. In the process of creating prototypes and discussing using them, you will be able to get a concrete picture of your company's elevated form. As a result, you'll be able to develop a more accurate data utilization policy, more accurate strategy, DX strategy. Specifically, you should be able to recognize the difference between the current situation and the ideal with respect to these factors. These are important points in the use of data, and they're often uncovered in the process of building prototypes. A discussion using prototypes is many times more constructive than simply having a conceptual abstract meeting. Okay, so environment, for example, cloud environment, network, OS, database, version control, analysis skills, analysis, calculation, pre-process, and visualization, statistics, yeah, etc. Adaptation, internal organization, internal promotion, capacity development plan, workshops, establishment of promotion office, center of excellence, learning environment, kind of a workshop, organization platform design. So being specific about the issue is directly related to the accuracy of the subsequent data utilization strategy. That's why we should avoid desk-based empty theory and the conceptual discussions as much as possible. Also, the speed at which you build the prototype is even more important. The products and the tools, as well as the external and internal environments, can become different after a year or 6 months. The word technology and the data is changing so fast, especially Tableau, because the thing is changing so fast. We have to make a quick decisions, and that's why we are building prototypes so quickly. Right. So agile thinking. In fact, regarding agile, the two elements are based on so-called agile thinking. In the realm of data analysis and data visualization, this image in the slide fits the picture. This is because it is easier to reach a high quality requirement definition or objective in the end by giving feedback and thinking about specific things. Think, build, think, build, think, build. Yeah. Agile thinking is the opposite of the waterfall type in which you think as you and think as you're in data analysis and utilization. This agile concept is a fundamentally important concept, I think. In the waterfall type, the image is that the requirement definition is solid, and the next step is taken after the okay is given, but it is almost impossible to establish a high quality requirement definition, specification, and objective without creating anything concrete. That's why I often see cases of people stopping at trying to make the perfect plan without making any specifics. Okay, so small start, quick win. When you start something new, you have to prove its worth. But without something concrete, it's hard to prove it, isn't it? What should we do in such a situation? It's a matter of betting a little bit of time. Small start, quick win. We tend to think big all of a sudden when we are about something, even though we haven't done anything before. And we tend to think how it exhaustively for all people, for all subject, for all data topic. However, the key to a successful small stack quick win is to be prepared and targeted. For example, narrow it down to the data that really matters in business model, narrow it down to the people, narrow it down to the analytical themes. Would be good if we could expand to the left side of the figure of this to the chasm, a so-called chasm. Um, Innovators and early adapters. This is called a chasm. And as an effective internal process for data utilization and digital transformation, it's a good idea to keep the foreign specific things underwater. It's a big graphic, but the organizations that do well often take these steps. Okay, so import perspective, small start. This is very concrete, specific steps I developed as effective internal process. Number one is promote the small success you've been able to achieve internally in your organization, in your department. Then people who want to emulate the success story will copy the same pattern. Same example perfectly and create a success story. The more of the same success pattern, and it's easier to get budget for a different pattern of data utilization in your company. And some executives, top management, who want to use the data for their own benefit are buying into the drivers of data use. So these steps are what I developed before. So incidentally, in this one, uh, there is a phrase success that could have happened in a small way. So the trigger is a small step, quick win. In my experience, if a business unit is confident that it can provide a data analysis, it will somehow get the data for a reason, secretly pursue data analysis and visualization, create a visualization with some level of implication and impact, and pass it on. When that happens, it's like, oh, how is this possible? This will be the odds of that happening are 100% at this point. This is also the power of thinking concretely by building a prototype as described in Agile thinking a little while ago. So culture, data culture. Data alone is not enough to make data utilization a success. According to a survey by Gartner, a leading IT research firm, CIOs are likely to be accelerators of cultural change rather than barriers. The implication of this is that organizations essentially have to change their culture. So I would like to mention how to create a culture within an organization and how it can be essentially changed. Data culture fostering and how to change the culture. So utilizing the data is very time consuming and actually hard work because it's about changing the culture that is cultivated by humans, ideas, and values. So I described the image, iceberg image. So the image this is a mock-up of that with an iceberg. It's hard to imagine how difficult it is to change the unspoken things, beliefs, and thoughts on the ice, even if you change the visible behavior itself. But leveraging data, changing it from the bottom up, and that's why it's so time consuming. Many people are impatient to get an effect, but you can't see the effect overnight. So what points should we not forget? In this section, I will make that point. So 4 points for culture development. Environment, we can trust data. If the data you see is not correct or trustworthy, you won't be able to access it. Keywords and actions that would support this perspective would include data governance, data catalogs, servers, permissions management, and the sharing of metrics. However, while these controls embodied in data governance and data catalogs are important, trying to control them too much can instantly reduce mobility and productivity. So it's difficult, but this is an important point. So number two, the point two, planning for data talent. This is this is related to HR. What I want to emphasize here is the design of the right talent policy, talent management policy for data analysis and data people who use data in practice. This would include recruitment, internal training policy, internal data training policies, capacity, talent management building, evaluation management, and compensation design as well. The reason why we need a foundation of data-related talent management is that we can't just hire the people we need for the individual specific data analysis that we need every day. Also, you can't have all data superstars in your company. If you look at many companies, you will find that analytics-related training is still considered optional, not mandatory in all positions and areas, and very few companies consider it required training, mandatory training subject. However, recently in Japan, we have been offering more and more training and for executives and managers. I have the impression that more and more strong companies have a strong understanding of what data sources they can use and what tools are available to them. I believe that the following will be effective. For example, outline data literacy as appropriate for each position on the job description, and design training program that are appropriate for each position, each department area. In addition, in any position, critical thinking for data analytics and visualization of basic data literacy, the ability to interpret data will become increasingly important. Point three, a place to share knowledge. This is kind of a center of excellence, a workshop topic. By creating a shared environment, offline, both offline and online, users will naturally learn in the community. Not only will you be able to develop your own skills, but you will be able to teach and share them with others. There may already be a place for technical questions and support at many companies. However, the most important thing that our community can do is to communicate with the users so that they are aware of potential needs, worries, and concerns rather than technical questions and solutions. In fact, the environment and analyst skills described so far are so specific and easy to discuss that decisions related to them are often made quickly, while the specification and analyst skills like of AWS or BigQuery are also easy to discuss in specific areas, such as R and Python. However, this concept of internal adaptation alone is so abstract and organization dependent that it tends to be neglected. However, in the medium to long term, this is the perspective from which that is most likely to accumulate. If a quick win for the community would do would be to the foreign. For example, setting up the portal page, a portal page for sharing knowledge, and maintain a user directory where user information is stored for each tool's license. Tableau, SAS, for example, ClickView, and create an FAQ page and share a learning plan that everyone can use. Data-related internal event announcement, implement and utilize information sharing tools such as Confluence and Slack in your organization. The last thing at point 4, commitment from top management, top executives. What I mean by commitment here is not just agreement or superficial agreement with the big data utilization policy, but rather a deep understanding of its value by the management themselves, to the point where they can set their own example. There are 3 main reasons why you need to make a commitment to use, because it's not something that can be done overnight. Because it is difficult to continue to do things that are difficult to see, such as internal adoption in your organization and skill development, unless they are supported. And it is essential to collaborate with multiple departments to utilize. So these reasons, executive sponsorship is really critical. In addition, when it comes to comprehensive data utilization based on data analysis, it takes time to produce results. So companies that only think about short-term optimization, short-term result, or focus on short-term ROI will find it almost impossible to succeed in reality. So realistically, it can be pretty painful if you have the mindset that money is too much and you can't wait until you're small and raising it for the first time. It's also tough when it takes more than a year of discussion to prove and persuade you to grow up utilization and big to break through them. This is because, as I mentioned earlier, the market and the conditions for various new technologies are changing so fast, and the given conditions are changing quite a bit. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me today. So my session, my presentation is finished. So thank you.
Thank you, Yukari-san. It's really interesting. Actually, for every participant, if you have any questions for Yukari-san or later for Sam or for any one of us, you can make use of the Q&A chat box, which should be shown in your lower right-hand corner. Yeah, there's a Q&A section. Don't confuse with the chat section though. Okay, so so far, does anyone have any questions? If not, before we introduce our second speaker, Sam, Harry-san, can I ask for one question? Because you previously talked about the importance of changing the culture, and you provided hints about establishing a center of excellence, and also you emphasize that it's important to get the support and buy-in from the top management, which I think everyone will agree that it is very important, but at the same time, it may be challenging to advocate for that in an organization, since if we are not already the top or senior people within the organization. Do you have any recommendation or advice for us? So in case, say, I am just one middle level person in the organization, what I can do to support the change of such culture?
Very difficult question. It really depends on the organization culture. So organization culture, the business model. So yeah, it's very difficult to answer that question. Let me think.
Okay, sure. We can bring it up later. And another question I have is you mentioned that you mentioned Tableau. There's a few other tools that you mentioned, such as AWS, and I do agree because right now, as a data people, we need to make sure we always make use of a suite of product to so that we can deliver the greatest value to the organization. Um, uh, from your observation right now, what other kinds of integration that you would look for and you would recommend people to explore?
Sorry, I can't hear you clearly. So
Yeah,
can you
so you
repeat?
mentioned a couple of things. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of other tools that you think will work well in driving the data culture. So, apart from Tableau, is there any tools that you're using as well?
BI? You mean BI?
No, and then let's say AWS or something like that, or
Yeah,
Salesforce.
AWS, BigQuery, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I think that's important thing as well, saying that um we need to drive if we need to drive the data inclusive culture. So oh wait, we have one questions here from Ming saying most companies in their systems most companies their systems and data source are very segmented. What are some of the suggestion or past experience you have dealing with companies like this?
Most given their assessment of data sources that are segmented for the what are some of the suggested past experience? Yeah, most companies, yeah, this is right. Hmm. My, com-
Curious. Yeah, yeah,
my,
go ahead, go ahead.
my company,
Sorry.
my company, my company provides the data integration services.
Oh.
we,
I see.
yeah, we review the data and evaluate the data and integrate and setting up the cloud. I mean AWS and BigQuery. I mean cloud data integration services. So yeah, it takes a lot of time, but yeah, it's worth to do.
Okay,
Mm.
and from my personal experience, it would depend. Say in my job in risk management day to day, we need to deal with data from various sources. So one tool that we find that is particularly useful is Tableau Prep, which right now you can basically set up how you want to integrate different data from different system, establish a flow, and it will allow you to rerun and adjust repeatedly. That's some of the tools that I think we can explore on as well. If we have no other question at this moment, maybe we can introduce our second speaker, Sam. So first of all, thank you, Carrie-san. Please stay, and maybe later after the presentation, we can have another Q&A sections. So Sam, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Good.
Hi, Sam. Do you want to introduce a bit about yourself and what you would like to share with the community here today?
Yes, definitely. By the way, just want to follow up on some of the last things that were mentioned by Krisa, and I'm truly glad that she's presenting the concept of building a culture and all that. And in fact, 4 years ago when I started my own consultancy firms, and now we are probably one of the leading AI consultancy firm in Hong Kong. And our people would ask, what's our recipe of success? And that is actually, in fact, a success. We were able to inspire new people to create data visualizations, use AI projects, and that really separated us from our competitor who mainly focused on the technology side. And that's very inspiring. And in fact, actually, our company name it's called Thinkco, which is it's called Promote Collaborative Thinking with AI Technology. So something I would talk about, but very inspiring. And I think everything you mentioned just now, I truly appreciate it, and it was great. But good. So now that maybe I'll talk about the topic that I will discuss today, which is the idea of AI-centric approach to social crisis management. Um, and the theme for today is about intelligent monitoring at scale. So when we think about digital crisis occur in the digital space, automatically we already think about tons of crises online, tons of media messages. How do we not only monitor each of these elements, but we need to monitor them in a very intelligent manner. Right? So I'm just gonna double check, see if is my voice, is everything okay? In terms of okay. Let me just start from here again. Yeah. So the lessons for definitely one of the theme for today is the intelligence monitor at scale, and that's going to be the recurrent theme about discussion. A little bit about myself, and as I've mentioned just now, a few years ago I started my own AI consultancy firm, Finco, which is promote collaborative thinking with AI technology, and it really throws back at what Yukai was talking about, the whole culture aspect, and we were just by doing that we were able to uncover and build so many different AI technology, not from the IT side, it's actually all from the business side. And that was very inspiring. In the last 3 years, we have grown a lot. And recently, I've started to change my business model, and I'm starting 2 other businesses. And the second business is what I do is I connect startup with enterprise through joint venture collaborations, and I build AI products. And one of the products that I'm building now, it's a tool that allows anyone to analyze or forecast social media trend with AI technology. So in a way, it's kind of like Tableau, but instead of analyzing, but our focus would primarily be social media text. And regardless of whether I did my consultancy firm or my current practice in building products, our vision is always the same. It's about collaborative thinking and AI technology. It's about empowering people with no technical abilities to build great AI solutions. So those are the main themes, and it just happens to be talking about that in my early session, 5%, which is great. Now, so for today's discussion, I want to kind of give some background on what is social crisis management and what are some of the problems with having a consequences of a digital connected world is that because of there's a massive increase on interaction online, that creates a problem because sources of crisis comes from not just traditional media, it comes from everywhere. And with that problem, how do we improve our efficiency of crisis management with AI? And of course, the best way to understand a concept is to understand through a case study, which I've done, and I actually went through and got all the data and then tried to analyze it, unstructured data, to analyze what are some of the employee grievances towards banking policy. So how well people are thinking that banks are protecting them in the organization against the COVID-19. And my final thoughts on some of the challenges and benefits when it comes to applying an AI framework into crisis management. Okay. So what is social crisis management? Social crisis management is the idea that if there's a crisis going on social media and someone is being alert of a problem, these crises generally will become a negative, will lead to a negative perception of a company. And because of these negative perceptions, a lot of times what we have to do is not just, we need to understand this problem, the crisis, and we need to activate a plan to rectify that problem. So for instance, this is a very interesting topic, especially in the last couple of years, what has happened in Hong Kong. For instance, a lot of times, whenever there's a company has been mistakenly identified as a specific political spectrum, they are often being targeted by people to, not shop at their places or getting criticized. And so a lot of these things are actually spurred online on social media. Or if there's a product defects and someone wants to ask the company to get a refund or to complain about the product, but nobody's responding to them, then that gets viral in the social media space too. Employee grievance is like when employees complaining on social media about their company not giving them enough protections or benefits and things like that. And another aspect of crisis, it's not so much on an actual crisis or an event, but there are actually a lot of people out in the market now, we call them as trollers, who are creating fake crises. And in retrospect, is that most of these crises are online and are started and beginning and amplified on the social media space. And one of the goal for crisis management is to understand the risk of these crises and activate a response plan so that whether it's your customers or your organizations, they will feel that people will look to social media for assurance and guidance that even if you might not have solved the problem, but people know that you acknowledged it, you have a proper response with it, and that would actually impact your brand quite heavily. Okay. Now, so this is a brief understanding about crisis management in social space. But what is some of the consequences of a digital connected world? Because many years ago, when we think about crisis, it's usually a crisis that we read on a newspaper. So we call that like a 24-hour window. But nowadays, crisis actually comes instantaneously. People complaining about your product, your service, and your political stance. So all of this that brands need to take account of, not just the traditional media, but they also need to take account of what's going on in social media space. But why is that? Why is social media such a powerful tool that have caused so much problem to understanding crisis? Because in retrospect, when we look at crises that are spurred by newspaper, let's just say in Hong Kong, maybe the top 10 or 20 channels that were able to channel these crises and bubble up and make it spread like wildfire. But unfortunately, now you don't have 10 or 20 channels that you need to deal with. You need to deal with millions of users online that will be sharing their needs and want and frustration about the company. And these brings into 3 different problems. So now we call it the 3 problems. The first problem is with social, there is a problem with democratize the influence. So what that means is that even if you're not just a public figure with a lot of people following you, if you just use Facebook, and I'm guessing most people here probably have 200 or 300 friends, they probably don't even know them most of the time. But regardless, is you have the ability to send out a message to a lot of people, and that gives you power. The voice for everyone. And that's a big challenge for crisis management. Secondly, the speed of transmission. Okay, because messages now are not spreading on a 24-hour window where tomorrow I'm going to read the news and I'm going to find a crisis going on. No, it happens instantly now. So if something gets spread on, like, let's just say a forum in Hong Kong, it will get spread into Facebook, and then afterwards it just goes viral. And something that's negatively affect your brand will go viral. And the idea of a digital connected world, one of the issue is that everything is transparent, and that increases your accountability as a company. That if there is a problem, if someone complains about your company, you are expected to solve it. So because of all these 3 problems, a digital connected world creates a lot of new challenges into creating an effective crisis management protocol. And with so many crises going on that could negatively impact your company's brand, one of the issue is that if a crisis is left unattended, your financial reputational loss is unexpected. For instance, if there's a company, let's just say there's a company recently called Meetup, it's a food vendor, but that has been mistakenly categorized as a company that's quite we classify as the blue side, but because of that, that impacted the image of the company, and a lot of the change just shut down, and that's a big problem. And there's a lot of more examples in Hong Kong, in particular, how this is a problem, and the why we need to find these crises quickly is that there are two parties that are very important that finds this that needs to solve this issue. So one, you have on one side you have the PR agency that has a contractual responsibility to the client to handle crisis within a short time, within a fixed time frame. And then you have on the other side an enterprise companies that needs to mitigate the operational risk. So timing is important. So here what we show is that when a negative comment just goes viral, how do we solve that before it goes viral? It could be a scandal, anything else. Right? Now, with the that challenges, there is an opportunity that where we can improve on the existing process. And that's why I told you the theme of today is about not just scalability, but it's intelligent scalability. Because we need to improve efficiencies of crisis management with AI. Now, let's take a step back and say, okay, what is crisis management from the end-to-end cycle? Let's just say there is a set of negative comments about your company, whether it's about your business, your services, or people mistakenly think that you are a political, you stand in a political, you have a specific political stand. Then these conversations, you need to monitor them. So what do you mean by monitoring the conversations? Is that you need to know if the crisis begin on social media, or does it negatively impact your brand? Or what is the severity of the crisis? Because I can't handle every crisis online. There's just going to be ones that I need to focus on. And finally, I need to think about the crisis not as just one crisis. We need to think about different types of crisis because different people will take charge on resolving crisis. For instance, maybe the legal team, they will handle the crisis with legal matters. HR will do their thing, and so on, procurement process and such. So all of this is about monitoring conversations in a data-driven way. But once you have analyzed these conversations, the next step is about executing this plan. Right? So in here, one of the thing is that if a crisis is being amplified, right, we find a crisis, we need to notify the appropriate stakeholder, we need to act quickly and acknowledge, and need to pre-approve bank of responses. So all these, now that we found the crisis, we found the right person to talk to, we have a pre-approved bank of responses to that crisis, then the next step is to engage and respond. So this is a typical process that we do from finding the conversations to monitoring the conversations and then to executing the crisis management protocol. Okay, so now let's take a, so my focus for today is the AI and non-AI approach of the middle section, which is the monitoring of conversations, whether using AI and Tableau to analyze it. In a non-AI approach, is that we look at, people would take, maybe one of my clients would take 3,000 comments on social media about their company brand, and then they would conduct a manual interpretation of every single comment. Can you imagine reading through 3,000 comments a week and figure out whether there's a crisis going on? Can you imagine we're just waiting for the media outlet to tell me there's a crisis going on? That's very difficult. And for some people that are fortunate to buy tools, to buy all tools, is that we can set up the a lot of times what they do is that they will set up the keyword rules. So given that certain keyword exists or a condition, then they would consider it as a crisis. So in summary, a lot of crises are going on social media. In the traditional approach is that you use human and media outlet to verify it, or you use these complex rules. So one of my clients probably uses maybe 1,000 different rules to to define the rules. But the biggest challenge is that with all of these complex rules, you need to refine it and create new ones. That's where the challenge comes in. Now, this is an AI approach. Same situation, given that we have many conversations about a brand, and our next step is to, this time we're not manually reading it. We're using a machine learning. We call it a type of unsupervised learning. Is that how do we turn maybe 4,000 comments into specific groups, like different types of what we call by clusters. So it makes it a lot easier than reading 3,000, 4,000 comments. Now maybe you're just reading 20 groups. That's much easier. And through these groups, what you can do is you can find this group and help you leverage and to say, hey, this group, this crisis, let's recognize it and we'll learn it and tell the AI model to learn. So what we do is that taking these repetitive patterns, we find these groups and we put it into AI and train so that every time when the AI reads a new crisis online, it's able to categorize it immediately, right? And then so on, after this entire process, the usual protocol will be established for crisis management. I understand this will be a little bit complicated, so that's why I prepared a case study so that we can follow through. I'm just going to do a little status check on if things are we good for everything, Paulo? I just want to not lose anyone.
Yeah. So please go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. All right, just want to status check. So today's case study is we're looking at social monitoring for employee grievance towards the bank's protection policies. So we're looking at people that are complaining about how maybe the banks are not taking the proper protocols into protecting their safety when it comes to the COVID-19 crisis. So what we realized was that a lot of people are actually complaining about this because let's just say people are working from home, some of them, and they're not given maybe masks or they're not given some of the employee benefits from working from home. And they feel that there's a lot of frustration going on, right? So people actually complain online about this. But later on when you look into the model, the analysis, which I'm going to show you, is that you'll see these analyses are quite interesting. So what I did in the demo is that in the first dashboard, what we did was so our company, we created our own data crawling engine. So we crawled all the data that has mentioned two types of keywords. One is virus related keywords, and the second one is banking. And the second thing that we did was we took all of these conversations and we, instead of reading 400 comments and figure out the number of topics that are clustered, we use a algorithm using text clustering to put them into these groups. So you're, instead of reading just 400 comments, you're reading maybe 20 topics. It's a much easier process, right? And thirdly, now that I can easily select these groups, I can pick out exactly which group I would define as crisis or non-crisis or relevant or irrelevant. Because you have to understand, a lot of times when you create, we just use a basic filter of the keyword virus and banks, that might not necessarily be talking about policies to protect their employees. It could be many things, which I will show you now in a demo. So everyone can see this. Whoops, sorry. I'm just gonna go here.
It's clear. Yeah.
It's fine. Okay. Okay. So here you see that we have collected a lot of comments from January 16 to February 26, 19. I think something interesting that I would say elaborate on is that I think a lot of times when we think about Tableau, we think about analyzing unstructured data. But a lot of times what we do in machine learning is to turn that unstructured social media data into structure so that we can put it into the platform for much easier for visualizations. Right? So in here, you see that a lot of comments are heavily distributed in Telegram and in Done, which is kind of like a Reddit for people who don't understand, who don't know about them, but which is something very interesting. The reason why is that we find that when people complain about their company, is that they don't complain about their company on Facebook, obviously, because maybe your manager or colleagues will probably know you complained your company, right? So everyone is actually complaining about the company through Telegram, which you keep the anonymous aspect of it, right? And here you see the different type of banks that I mentioned in these comments. But again, this is just using a basic keyword rule-based approach to finding these 400 comments during this time. Not every single comment here is talking about policies regarding how banks are handling the work from home situations and how they're protecting their colleagues. So what we had to do was this. We need to use a type of algorithm, an AI algorithm. Instead of reading 400 comments, we put them into 20 groups. Right? So after reading through these 20 groups, we would, here are some summaries of each group and what we talked about. So for people who can't read Cantonese, I will elaborate. I'll take a few and give an example. So in this comment with 12 related posts, out of those 400 comments, it's talking about how the virus is causing a drop in stock price, and that's leading to bank implementing policy to reduce the pressure, right? But that, I mean, yes, they have the keyword banks and virus, but it's not really about employee, it's not really about policy about protecting employees. So that's not a comment that's very relevant. But imagine reading 400 comments and trying to find this group. That's really difficult. Secondly, there are comments about how there was a bank called the East Asia Bank that someone was contracted with the COVID-19 and that they had to clean the bank. Customers, people in Standard Chartered are not happy with the arrangements. But oh, by the way, I want to keep it this as a understand. We did not work for a similar case for that for a bank. So it's not. This is all for the purpose of this case study. And okay, continue. And there are certain cases where this is about people that have bought like fake face mask, and this is about hotels. So for some reason, some of these distribution groups have the words virus and banks in them. So that's why it's being clustered. So in here, we can quickly find the groups that we should tell the AI, be like, hey, if I'm telling AI, hey, AI, can you tell me which comment automatically is about employee protection policies and non-employee policy, despite the fact you have the keywords banks and virus. So this becomes a much more challenging thing to do, right? That's why you need supervised learning, we call it, to train the model. Okay. So once we train the model, I take these groups, I tell the model, hey, this is a good relevant one, this is not a relevant crisis. Then this automatically builds a model that can separate. Oh wow, okay. Gone.
Technical issue.
Yeah, Tableau. So cool. I think just need to refresh. Explore other content. Wow, okay. Let me think. How do I handle this? Do I start from scratch?
I hope it's not because your neighbor are all using Netflix and that drives all the bandwidth.
No, I am.
Yeah, I do suffer that problem. So sometimes when I was working and suddenly it's not working, and I realize it's my family is using Netflix. So
Yeah. No worries, no worries. It's not a big deal. I love Tableau. It's amazing. They never fail on me, so it's great. Let me just double check the links and stuff so that we can quickly. Okay. Okay. I think should be okay. I just need to find that link. Okay. Loading again. Okay, here we go. Okay, so in here, we have taught the machine learning to every comment that comes in, we can categorize in one of the group, whether it's relevant or irrelevant. So as you can see, the previous post that we categorize as talking about the banks and how the stock price is dropping, that's not relevant to policies related to protecting employees, right? So that will be automatically categorized irrelevant in the irrelevant side. And in these other comments, regarding the closing of the hours and how the opening of the online sessions, and there's also about work from home, suggestions. So these are comments that are really relatively, they're relevant to our current case, right? And so because of the time limit, we didn't build a model that we only built a small model that looked at relevant and irrelevant comments. But in reality, when some of the cases that we worked on in for our clients is that instead of just looking at the comments, whether it's relevant, we actually assess every single social media data and look at the impact of the crisis. So what does it mean by impact? So like how viral it is, how it's going to spread. We also look at the sentiment, whether this comment is going to negatively impact a brand or the topic, right? What does it mention? Maybe it's this time is mentioning about working hours. Another one is talking about, we found a lot of people complaining about the Wi-Fi and the passcode, things like that. And the reason why we need to maybe put a topic in it is because maybe different people need to handle situation differently. So and that's why every comment in the case that we usually work with our clients, we don't just say the comment is relevant to this crisis. We actually tell the AI model to automatically say categorize it into these sections. Okay, so these are different crises that we can define as. So I think AI is great. Don't deny it. It creates the idea of intelligent scalability, but this comes with some challenge, especially in the Hong Kong space, because there's a challenge that you need to teach the AI multilingual learning process. You need to adapt to the slangs and culture process, and more importantly, you need to understand new vocabularies every day. So for instance, there's a term called decoration, renovation. This is, if people understand, renovation itself is a term that's usually just used for renovating a building, but now it's using as a way to say I'm going to vandalize your building, right? So the AI needs to be able to understand new semantic meaning based on the change of time. So that's really challenging. And thirdly, if you recall, we need to build training data sets to categorize each social media by their crisis. But in order to do that, you need to feed enough examples to the AI to learn. So you need to say, hey, this crisis, the severity is not that great. It's level 3. This is level 2. this crisis is about HR, this is a crisis about legal aspect. And you understand that keyword search alone doesn't help, because if you saw our case just now, we used the keyword virus and banks. These two keywords came out with many things. It came out about stock price. It came about a currency exchange. It came about how the government's helping subsidize the banks because of the virus. All of this is not about keyword search. You truly have to use an AI-centric approach to understand the entire context of the comment to make an accurate prediction. So finally, the benefit of AI, right? There's a challenge here, is that now that you can detect crisis quickly, faster than human, you can coordinate a response across channel quickly. You can engage and respond to community in a much faster aspect. Because let's just say there's a comment that's a negative brand that's experienced, and let's just say in 5 hours, the comment's gonna spiral to 1,000 people. But before it spirals to 1,000 people, maybe it's just a lot cheaper, a lot cost efficient to mitigate that problems with an effective response plan before it reaches 1,000 comments of that crisis. Maybe when it reaches 30 comments, I already address that crisis. And that is much better for the brand itself and for the overall strategy about using crisis management in this aspect. So in summary, the goal for crisis management, this first step that we really mentioned today, is how do we intelligently interpret every single crisis so that we can prioritize our protocols to be set forth later on, so that it becomes a much better way to protect your brand in the long term. It's like buying insurance, but it's definitely worth it. So that concludes my presentation for today. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't lose anyone. Hello?
Paulo, I think you're on mute. Bill?
I'm on mute. Okay. Don't tell me I was just on mute, right? Like not the entire time.
You're fine. Well, Paulo, I think maybe he has some technical issues, but Sam, I think we have one question for you from Isaac.
Okay.
May I know how's the accuracy of the NLP model that your company is building? As I could expect that most of these social comments are in Cantonese, which have so many problems, not to mention sometimes when there's a mix of English and internet slang.
Yeah, it's a great questions. So when we think about accuracy, there's, especially when it comes to analyzing Cantonese, we need to think about the trade-off. There's two ways of looking at problem. One problem is, do you want to miss out a lot of things, or do you want to make sure that whatever I detect to you is correct? It depends on case by cases, but in general, crisis management, we don't want to miss anything. So we'll give up maybe 70% accuracy to make sure that it's not, we don't miss anything. So if you ask me, depending on the scenario, depending on the number of sample data we have, then that's what the accuracy could range between 60 to 80%. Okay, and I think one of the biggest challenge, one of the things that differentiator from different companies is how well they can accurately predict all the models, but also how well they can tell you, that give you expectation on which model can achieve 90% or 80%, because it's not so much as about having a lot of data. Because my experience tells me that even sometimes when people have a lot of training data, but they don't do it in a way that the data annotation process really correlates with the AI aspect of it, and how it's being organized in a way that makes AI efficiently run, you can achieve much higher business success, I would say, not so much on the accuracy side. So I think all of these comes into play when looking at that, when figuring out that number.
Great question. And then another one would be, do you have any use case you can share using AI and Tableau jointly in the commercial world?
Well, I mean, I just use Tableau, right, to display the conversations. But one of the thing is that Tableau, of course, you can connect with Pythons and you can run the engines but because of our proprietary algorithm, we have to. It's much more complex process. But generally, we run the results and then we display it on Tableau. The good thing about there's a lot of social listening tools out there that provides data visualization, but the thing I didn't like about those ones is that it doesn't give that flexibility customizations. So for instance, a lot of times customers are not just looking at social media data and wants and embedding that into the chat and into Tableau, into the data visualizations. They actually want to combine social media data with structured data like sales. So how is sales being impacted with certain like social media trends and such. So all of these actually comes into play. So that's why I prefer using Tableau instead of a alternative solution. Yeah.
Great. And I think we have Paulo. I think you're back now. If you want to unmute and close the remarks.
Yes, sorry, I bet it's my labor washing my effects again. So sorry for getting off. I know we are running late, so thank you again for everyone joining tonight's virtual meeting. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, Yukai or Sam offline. Our contact is listed in the event page again. So thank you very much, and I wish everyone have a great long weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.